It doesn't really matter whether you use TikTok or don't use it. I think banning it through the Restrict Act is going to have farther reaching impact. The Restrict Act is talking about foreign entities, specifically what they call adversarial foreign entities. And in the bill, there's a list of like 5 different countries, which it says are adversarial countries. And that's not the people of the country, that's that the government of those countries has been shown to been adversarial with the United States. Again, not the people. I think the kicker here, though, is when we look at TikTok and what the CEO talked about before the committee, they're not doing anything different. It's just that that data is being held outside the United States until an operation happens. They talked about like Operation Texas, which moves a lot of their infrastructure to US based. It goes to Texas. They're going to have a US based team, US based security, US based auditors, all to look at those systems, which starts pulling them more towards a domestic social media, which changes the math. But the Restrict Act is talking about foreign adversarial entities and whether or not we should be protecting the American people through this act. Now, here's where I take exception to the act. High level, what it's doing is it's saying if there's an adversarial foreign entity which is owned, the executive branch has the ability to ban that. And this is where it gets a little weird, because the bill itself is written somewhat vaguely. And this is where everyone's saying, oh, it's the Patriot Act, or oh, they're going to ban VPNs. And it doesn't seem to be the intent of it. And they've come out and said that's not the intent of it, or really what it's saying. The kicker is, though, the vaguities could be later interpreted that way, and that's what concerns me. The legislative branch is formulating the bill, the executive branch will execute it, and then later on, if there is conflict, the judicial branch will maybe try and reinterpret it. So how it's written right now is, say the executive branch, it passes, the executive branch declares TikTok a banned entity. This is where VPNs start coming in. What would happen is a VPN can be used to bypass this ban. So if you, as an individual, use some garbage VPN service to circumvent this blocking mechanism they put in place, which they haven't really declared yet, then that VPN could be held responsible. And you as an individual could also be fined $250,000. You're not probably ever going to get hit that way, but it's not really necessarily set in stone. But here's the thing is, if TikTok moves it domestically, we start having a different conversation, which is what is TikTok doing that the other social media isn't? Because if it's in China, there's then that question of whether or not the government can grab that data, siphon that data, and they can do it and have impact and look at the algorithm and all of these type of manipulation things. But if it's in the States, there's not a protection. And this is what's terrifying for me. And before I dive into that, I want to ask you a question. On a 0 to 10, if I told you whether it's Siri, okay, Google, Lexus, whatever listener assistant device you had, if the news came out tomorrow, which said, hey, this device has been listening to you, they've been storing all the information, and it's public and it's out there, how surprised would you be? Would you be oh my gosh, this is I never would have thought in a million years this would have happened? Or would you go, yeah, that didn't never even faze me? Because that's the thing, is our privacy in this country has just turned into the punchline of a joke. It's this, oh yeah, that's kind of what I've expected. When I've talked to my father, it's been yep, I just assume they are listening all the time. It's terrifying, because when we look at the privacy policies and really the privacy laws of this country, they're woefully inadequate. Heck, the best one, which is kind of there, is the California Consumer Privacy Act. But if you're not in California, you're not covered. The next one is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPA. Doesn't help you if you're under or you're over 13, because that only affects kids. You have things like HIPAA, which is good because that's healthcare, is a law and it protects it. But again, healthcare, not really this type of data. The Gramm-Leach-Bailey Act, that's financial, not going to affect this. The Fair Credit Reporting Act doesn't affect this. You could consider the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, but that's really only for intercepting or surveillance. And it's concerning that there's not really a privacy framework or a privacy law that protects our information. If you found out that TikTok or another social media platform was doing some sort of psychological experiment, you think we would be up in arms. We'd be furious. We'd say that's against the terms of service. I'm done with your service. Yet Facebook came out and admitted this in 2012, and they're still around. People still use it. Google came out and found out that they were recording all the text to speech, and that was being stored in Facebook with Cambridge Analytica. And TikTok hasn't had these things, and our own social media has. And the Restrict Act looks at it from it's a foreign entity, we're going to ban this. Like, they can ban things like the Kaspersky antivirus, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong because surgery and nasal surgery almost recovered. They can ban the antivirus, but this is where it just starts getting annoying to me. Because while I want to look domestically, we don't have a framework to force people. The closest we could come would be something like a SOC 2 with a privacy policy or requirements, but that's not a law. And you can scope a SOC 2. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say I'm going to applicate a company which has application. I'm going to take your data. I'm starting up a new social media application. And I'm going to get SOC 2. And I'm going to I'm going to add on a privacy policy. I'm going to evaluate that. Well, one, I get to scope that. I can actually just scope my application, say we're only looking at the physical security controls, host my stuff in AWS, and I'd pass a SOC 2 audit. So, and then if I do scope it to privacy, I will say, here is my policy, which might be crap, and then here is my evidence, and staple that together and also pass it. So this is where the crux of the matter is. We need to establish a framework and then hold these companies to that framework. We don't have one. And I think, moreover, the reason to have a compliance policy is to hold our own government responsible with programs like PRISM in the Patriot Act, which didn't require warrants to be able to pull so much of this information from Google and Apple and other ones. It's deeply concerning that we don't have a framework that we can protect our own privacy. In Europe, there's a thing called the GDPR, and it's good in some ways. Again, it's not as mature in others, but it's getting there. Our laws are really far behind when it comes to hacking, privacy, security requirements, and everything like that. But GDPR tried to do in the EU what we really need to do here. It sets out strict requirements. It sets out penalties. It's like 4% of total global gross that you can be held responsible for. It sets out very strict requirements on things that companies need to adhere to. The problem is it hasn't really evolved over time, and that's the problem with some of these laws, is that they don't evolve over time. Like today, Italy banned ChatGPT, which we can all agree, I think AI is going to have a tremendous impact on the future, whether it's writing, whether it's better intelligence, heck, whether it's new cameras coming out with better autofocus. AI is going to be changing things, and it feels so goofy to hinder some of this technology because it doesn't adhere to an old policy. So we need a framework. Taking a quick break from framework, though, I'm going to come right back. I want to talk about why the Restrict Act isn't really the greatest thing. And the thing I have concerns about is because within China, there's like the Great Chinese Firewall, which bans certain social media of our apps, US-based apps, going in, and some of their citizens from accessing data outside. I think one of the values of the internet right now is that we can access anything. There isn't a restriction based on our government or any other that restricts us from going out and getting data. Things like ChatGPT, if the government banned that, that would be so sad because there's so much innovation happening with that. And I think this bill allows the ability, again, maybe not within this executive branch. Maybe they're being altruistic. Maybe there is, like they're trying to keep the American people safe. But later on, if the president changes, the power stays with the executive branch. And maybe later on, it will be used to just cut off different media sources from coming in or us reaching out. I don't like that. For me, I do like the ability to, like, if I want to do the dumb thing, if I want to trade my privacy on my device and my information out because I want to download that, that is my choice. It's not theirs to make. Though there is the concern on things like mass manipulation. It's a hard topic. I would love a solution, which is we have a framework. And if companies want to do business, if we want to do software, if we want to do it right, we have a framework which companies need to go through, a comprehensive privacy policy that everyone needs to adhere to in order to go through. If TikTok wants to serve it to American people, if Amazon or if Google wants to, they have to all adhere to this framework. And it has to be comprehensive. It has to list out very strict penalties, expectations, and above all things, I think it needs transparency to know what you're doing with the data. It needs to empower us to have more control over our privacy and settings, and it needs to be simple and easy to understand, because here is the crux of it. I love where technology is going. It's growing, and we're being able to become more interconnected with each other, and there's innovations happening, exploding out. Whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's this AI software, large language models, augmented reality, Discord, and other types of software which are interconnecting us with new and exciting people. I love the fact that I can just make this video, I can throw it up online, and you guys can see it right away. I love where we're going, and I want us to be able to embrace this thing, keep our privacy, and not just be cut off when there's this weird disagreement that does happen. Gosh, I'm excited, but I hope this helped. I hope it gives you a little bit more information. Thanks for watching, and hack on.